I can't stop crying about it. We are 2/3 of the way in and here's another new character. Oh, we are literally 2 chapters away from the end and here's a new character. At first I was kind of confused and then I just accepted it and I was like, oh, okay, great, new character. It really was so reminiscent of a 90s rom-com. I also love anything set in the medical world because of my strong love for Grey's Anatomy. Hello everyone and welcome or welcome back. It is the end of the month and if you know what that means, we are doing my February reading wrap up. I feel like I had a very random reading month. I had a video planned for this channel that I was going to film that I ended up postponing to March, and so I feel like my TBR just kind of went out the window and I ended up reading some random books, but they were books that had been on my TBR for a while, and so I do feel like I got some books off my TBR, which is great. Yeah, a little bit of random reading month, but that's okay. This month I read 9.5 books. I read 3 romance, 3 literary fiction, 1 YA fantasy, 1 mystery, and 1 nonfiction. So I think let's just get right on into it. The first book I read this month was First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This is a romance book, slightly based off of Sleepless in Seattle, and it has all of that nostalgic rom-com vibes that you could ever want. This book is about Aiden and Lucy. Aiden is the host of Baltimore's romance hotline radio show. However, he is not a very romantic person. He doesn't really believe in love. He is just kind of down on love, and that all changes for him when Lucy's daughter calls into his show and wants him to help her find a boyfriend for her mom because she's scared that her mom isn't happy. And Lucy overhears her daughter talking to someone, barges in, starts talking to Aiden over the air, and she is a true romantic at heart. She believes in true love. She's waiting for that right person to come along and be her soulmate, and it goes viral and everyone is talking about Lucy's true love, and so they invite Lucy to come on to the radio show, and it kind of becomes a radio show version of The Bachelorette, and so she's getting to talk to guys on the show and she goes on dates, and all this time her and Aiden are spending more time together and maybe realizing that they have more of a connection than they first thought, and it was just so good. It really was so reminiscent of a 90s rom-com and I loved it. Lucy was such an interesting main character. I've never read a book that had a main character like her before. She was a car mechanic. She really put her whole heart and soul into her family and into her daughter, and she had this cast of characters around her that were so funny. I love a book with really strong side characters that really make the story, and this book was totally like that. And the reason why I said I read 9.5 books is because the sequel to this book, And Now Back to You, just came out this week. I think the covers look so cute together. I love that they're similar. And this book follows one of the side characters that we see in First Time Caller, the weatherman at the radio station who is Aiden's like best friend, who is really encouraging along the way. You just kind of grow to really like this character, and he is the male main character in this one. Our female main character is the weather woman at the news station, TV station across the street from the radio station, and I'm only like a third of the way in, so I feel like I couldn't really count it for this month because I don't know what the rating is yet, but I am really enjoying it. I've just been recently introduced to her writing, but I've just really enjoyed all the books that I've read by her, and I'm so happy to have a new romance author to read. Alright, the next 3 books I read, I did a full reading vlog on. These were for my Reader Roulette Cards reading vlog, and so I'm not going to talk a ton about them just because if you watch that video, this will all be very redundant. If you didn't watch the video, I'll still give you my thoughts on them, but if you want to see a more in-depth review, feel free to watch that video. It was my first reading vlog on this channel. I was really happy with it. The first card that I pulled said read a book by a new to youth author, and I picked Libby Page's This Book Made Me Think of You. I had just bought this book and I was really wanting to read it, and so this is what I picked for my new to you author, and again, I really enjoyed this book. This was literary fiction, and I can't believe that I've read 3 literary fiction this month because that is not my genre at all. It just kind of happened that way. This book is about Tilly, and her husband Joe has recently passed away. away, and before he passed, he left her a present at a bookshop that he partnered with to give her a year of books. So he picked out 12 books for her, one for each month, and every single month after he passes for a year, she gets to go to the bookshop and pick up the book alongside a letter from him explaining why he picked that book for her and how he hopes it'll help her on her journey through grief. And it was just such a sweet story. I, again, really enjoyed the side characters in this book. I thought they were so fun. I thought they really made the story. Because she gets a book every single month, the story is also divided like that, and so it's literally divided into months, and then between the months you have chapters as well, but the story just moves so quickly in a really good way. It kept me engaged. I think that's one thing that I struggle with literary fiction, is getting bored by the middle of it, and I think because so many things were happening in this book, and it's not that often that you see a year pass within one book, and yes, we were like skipping over chunks of time, but it just kept you engaged and kept you wanting to read more and like see what the next book was. And one thing that I really enjoyed about this book was that at the beginning of every month, when we had the month page, it says Book Lane Recommends, which was the name of the bookstore, and it had 5 book recommendations that were all themed. So for January, it says books to read when you don't feel like reading. For February, I think it was books to read when you're hungry. Yes, or books to make you hungry. And so every single month it had book recommendations of real books that you can go out and read, and I just love that. I felt like this book was really a love letter to reading and the power of books, and yes, I just really enjoyed this one. The next book that I read that I can't find is Heartless by Elsie Silver, and I did not enjoy this book very much. It was just really not for me, and I feel like such a prude saying this, but I thought it was way too spicy. Way too spicy for me. I could not get into it. There were things that the author kept saying in the sexy scenes that I was just like, ew, like that's just gross. And so it was not for me. I really am sad that it wasn't, because this book has incredible reviews. It has an over a 4-star average on Goodreads with like 500,000 reviews, and so it's a very loved book, but I was just not one that loved it personally. There was also something that happened in the end that I really didn't enjoy, and yeah, it was not for me. I think I'm also just not a cowboy romance girl. I think I've decided that about myself. I have no interest in being with a cowboy, I guess. So yeah, not for me, but that's okay. Not every book is gonna be. And then the last pick for the video, I picked The Swan's Daughter by Roshni Chokshi. I loved this book. This is a slight Swan Lake fairy tale retelling, and it was just so beautifully written, so magical. The only reason why this wasn't a 5-star is that sometimes I would get confused because the world was so intricate and because there were all these different aspects to the magic system and the curses and all that stuff. So I really think that's the only reason why I didn't give it 5 stars, because it was so close to being a 5-star, because I just loved being in this world so much. This is about Prince Eris and Demelza, and Demelza is a Veritas swan, which means that when she sings, people are forced to tell the truth in her presence. And Prince Eris is the prince of a kingdom where his lineage had been cursed by a sea witch, so that it's almost fated that when he gets married, his wife will try to kill him, and that's what's happened to basically everyone in their lineage. All the kings have died by the hand of their wife trying to get the power. I never fully understood what the power was. I think that was one of my big problems. But other than that, I loved it. The magic system, the world building, everything was so intricate and everything was so beautifully written and magical. And again, loved the cast of side characters, loved all of the settings, and I really enjoyed it. I wish it was a 5-star. It was so close to being a 5-star, but it just wasn't quite there. And then the rest of the month is where it kind of got a little random for me. I just started reading random books, but again, I got some books off my TBR, so I guess it's all fine. The next book I read was The Roommate Pact by Allison Ashley. This was a romance between a firefighter and a nurse, and they are actually roommates, and the firefighter gets hurt and the nurse has to take care of him. And before he got hurt, the two main characters, they kind of like have this marriage pact that like when they turn 40, if they're both single, they'll get together. But the female main character was like, no, I don't think I want to marry you, but we can be friends with benefits. And so they kind of strike up this friends with benefits deal, but then he gets hurt and she has to start taking care of him, and obviously he can't be doing the thing when he's in a full body cast basically. And so they are just forced to spend a lot of time together and like unpack their past trauma and all that stuff. I think my issue with this book was that it just felt so dragged out, and it was a pretty short book. It was only 300 pages. From the very beginning of the book, there is so much tension and chemistry between the two main characters, and then they literally just like fight it for the rest of the book. By the time we got to the end and they were finally together, I was just like, I'm so tired of you all fighting your attraction to each other and finding excuses and reasons why you shouldn't be together. And so it just kind of annoyed me by the end, but it was a cute and easy read. It's a closed door romance, so if you don't like spice, this would be great for you. I also love anything set in the medical world because of my strong love for Grey's Anatomy, and so that aspect I liked as well. It was just the fact that they couldn't get together until the end, like that's how romance books work. But I was just kind of like, they're making no progress. They're just constantly falling more in love with each other, and still they have the same reasons about why they can't be together, and I didn't feel like the reasons were that big of a deal to be with each other. So yeah, it was cute and easy. If you like closed door romances, I would suggest this one. Next, I read The Devil's Food Cake Murder by Joanne Fluke. I won't talk too much about this because if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know I love these books. This is probably number 13 or 14 in the Hannah Swenson mystery series. Hannah Swenson is a baker and she solves murders, and this is a very cheesy Hallmark-esque mystery series. However, this was one of the better ones because this book left off on a cliffhanger, and that has never happened before in the history of the series. She's never left a book on a cliffhanger, and this one did. So I'm extra excited to read the next one. I say this every time, but this book series won't be for everyone. If you're someone who likes cheesy, cozy mysteries, you would enjoy it. If you're someone who reads more high-stakes thrillers, probably not going to be for you, but I personally love these books, and I usually end up reading like one every single month, so this was my pick for this month. Alright, the next book I read was 9 Women, One Dress by Jane L. Rosen. This was such a cute book, and it was such a uniquely written book. I've never read a book like this before. There were probably around 15 main characters in this book, and every single one of them got a chapter in their own POV. And when I tell you, this book can be very confusing just because there are so many characters, and I would say by like a fourth of the way in, I was starting to understand how they all connected to each other, but sometimes you wouldn't get the connection until the very end of the book, and you just had to be like, oh, okay, we are 2/3 of the way in and here's another new character. Oh, we are literally 2 chapters away from the end and here's a new character. At first I was kind of confused, and then I just accepted it and I was like, oh, okay, great, new character. But it was just a very sweet story. This was basically about one dress and how it affected 9 women in their lives, and it was kind of cool to see how all the characters related. I feel like it's hard to explain what happened in this book because this was definitely more of a character-driven story. I feel like there was plot happening, but it was mostly focused on what was happening in these characters' lives, and we were just kind of following them around. And so if you're someone who enjoys really highly character-driven books, I think you would enjoy this. If you don't, I don't know if you would. I think I enjoyed it because I felt connected to the characters. That's another thing. I feel like if you weren't, you would be so bored, but I was, and so I enjoyed it. There was also a strong tie-in of fashion in this book because of the dress, which I love reading about, and so I enjoyed this, but I feel like I could see it not being everyone's cup of tea. If that sounds enjoyable to you, I would say go for it. Alright, and then the last book that I read this month, I just filmed my wrap-up video for TikTok, and I cried when I was talking about this book, and so I'm going to try not to cry when I talk about it for this video, but I cried my way through this book, and I just feel like everyone needs to read this book because Oh my gosh. This is What Does It Feel Like by Sophie Kinsella. Sophie Kinsella was a author. She wrote the Confessions of a Shopaholic series and multiple novels after that. And a few years ago, she was diagnosed with brain cancer. She underwent surgery for it, chemo and radiation, and then she actually passed away in December of last year. And this was the last book she ever wrote, and I'm starting to get goosebumps and I'm probably gonna start crying again, but I'm gonna try not to. She wrote this book as fiction, but she says that it is her most autobiographical book to date. The character in the story is Eve Monroe, but Eve Monroe is basically Sophie Kinsella, and you see her talk about the Confessions of a Shopaholic series that she calls Hey Big Spender in the book, and then it kind of jumps forward and she's waking up from surgery and she doesn't know what's going on. She has a bandage on her head and she's really confused, and this actually happened to Sophie. She had surgery to remove the tumor from her brain, and it was an 8-hour surgery, and when she woke up, she had lost a lot of her memory. She knew her husband and she knew her kids, but she had no idea that she was sick. She was having really bad memory loss where every day she would wake up and be confused about what was going on. Her husband would have to tell her every single day, like, I'm so sorry, but you have brain cancer and you are undergoing treatment for it. And it just goes through her journey through the treatment and kind of her coming to terms with the fact that she has a terminal diagnosis. It was such an emotional book, and I feel like it's so easy to get wrapped up in your own world and your own problems, but in reality, I have never gone through something as hard as what she went through. And when she talks about telling her kids, and I'm gonna cry again. Ugh, I literally just talked about this, so I thought it was fine. She talks about coming to terms with the fact that she knows that she's going to die, and it really just was a reality check that everyone's days are numbered, and the best you can do is just hold on to the people that you love, count each day as a blessing, and yeah, it was just a really good book, and I feel like you should read it. Lord, I can't stop crying about it. All right, moving on from that, because sheesh, the last book I read this month and my one nonfiction pick for this month was Winter Season by Toni Bentley, A Dancer's Journal. This is actually a journal from Toni Bentley, who was a ballerina. I believe this was published in the 80s, and she was a ballerina with the New York City Ballet, and she danced under George Balanchine, and this was her diary that was published into a book, and it's her diary spanning a few months of their winter season and the ballets that they perform. It was a very raw book, like it was literally her personal feelings about dance, and you see her go through all these emotions of trying to figure out if she still even wants to dance, to realizing that dance is a part of her and it always will be. It was slightly hard to read at times because I think of ballet as this beautifully glitzy pink world, when in reality a ballet dancer's day to day is not really like that. I would say if you are interested in ballet and you want to know what a dancer's day to day looks like, read this book. Just know that it's not a very like pretty and pink romanticized version of it. It's the real things that they had to go through, and forming a union and trying to get more money and not being able to pay their rent because they weren't getting paid anything, and all the injuries that they had to go through, and dealing with older dancers and trying to figure out if she was even worth being there and all that stuff. So it was a really interesting book, a very obviously personal account of her day-to-day life, but I enjoyed it. She wrote another book. She's written a good amount of books. She became an author after she retired from ballet, and she wrote another one called Serenade, and it's all about George Balanchine's Serenade ballet, and I have that book. I just haven't read it yet, so I think that's definitely going to be on my list soon because I enjoyed her writing. But yes, those are all the books that I read in February. I still haven't decided if I want to do TBR videos on YouTube or just keep them to TikToks, but just know that if you're interested in that, I have it on my TikTok. I might only do TBR videos when I want to do a theme for them. For the next month, I have 2 reading vlogs that I want to film, and then I have an anticipated books video that I want to film, and then I have a vlog for you because at the bookstore we are doing a book retreat next weekend, so I'm going to vlog that for you and all that fun stuff. So many things to look forward to, but thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you in the next video very, very soon. Bye!